Hey there, greetings and welcome. This is Karen with Naturally with Karen and Legolas, who's in the background, who I took on Tuesday a week ago. So just a little over a week ago. Today's Thursday, so a week and 2 days. I drove up to Two Harbors and I picked up Legolas, and he is in rehab with me, overseeing what goes on with him, letting him out several times a day, getting him to dog parks and feeding him. Much like I took on a young man 2 years ago, and in our families, we have congestion, stagnation, we have toxicity, and I'm going to start covering some of this in a playlist I'm calling Toxic Brain, which is divided into, divided up. Toxic Brain is going to be a playlist series that's divided up into many different sections, okay? So today we're going to talk about stagnation. If you've ever gone and just walked out into the world and went to a store and were really observing with your eyes instead of just looking, instead of just walking outside and looking around you and seeing the world through the predictable, expected, and even rote, R-O-T-E, which means you just do it because that's the way you've always done it. You're going to see all around you people that are in pain, and in part they're in pain because of toxic brain, and a large part of that is due to stagnation. So let's get into it. Stagnation is a term that's commonly used in TCM in capital letters, and that stands for traditional Chinese medicine. Now, I was a recipient of traditional Chinese medicine. I'm looking over at Legolas here. He's going to be in the mudroom while I'm live streaming. Love streaming. And when I was there, I had some issues in my childhood, like a great many people do at Legolas. And so Chinese medicine, what it did for me was move the stagnant energy in my body. If you've watched other YouTube videos that I have, you'll find out that I've also used psilocybe. I used MDMA one time. I've used walking extensively. I've used extensive amounts of bike riding. Bless up, Karen. Good to see you. So stagnation is where our energy, for sundry reasons, can become very pooled. So think of it as like maybe when you were a child and mom or someone pointed out a stagnant pond. They said, no, don't go in there because it's stagnant water, which means you might get sick. You might get sick in stagnant water because the water's no longer moving. Well, your body has a circulatory system, just like your car, your vehicle has a water pump, right? And the gasoline has to, perform the locomotion, and the water pump needs to circulate to keep your engine cool. Otherwise, you get what? You get too hot. So you get hot-headed is the expression, right? Or you get out of your mind, or you've, quote, lost your mind. And this is what we're seeing when we go out. We go to Walmart, we go to the holiday store, we go to 7-Eleven back home. Schools are having all these shootings. And in my Toxic Brain number 3, because this is number 4, I talked about addiction. Well, there's also an addiction today to having the doctor fix it. And in my course, Crucial Keys to Unlocking Disease, it's a 5.5-hour course at naturallywithkaren.com. I give you everything that you would need to, if you want to ever go further on what I'm giving in these, love streams. I give you exactly what's going on in the mind-body psychosomatic. In other words, what's the history with Freud and Adler, and all the way into what did Louise Hay say, what did Dr. John Sarno say, and what did I actually do in working with real people for 16 years in Minnesota and for many years in California? Why is it so effective? And why are even cognitive neuroscientists today, quantum physicists, and people that are really in the know, that are not under the cloud or the umbrella of the American Medical Association that says, you do it this way. Here's the protocol. Here's the drug. Here's the surgery, here's the radiation, here's the chemo, here's what you do. So thank you, doctors, for everything that you do when it comes to trauma care, for all the help that you do with burns and cuts and breaks and trauma. Fabulous. When it comes to healing, move over and let the women that have carried it forward from the grandmothers take over, because we know what we're doing. There's a big difference between treating and healing. And let me get into just why. So in traditional Chinese medicine, you would go and you would lay down in a comfortable space in a room temperature room, not too cold, not too warm, right? And you would lay down in a relaxed way, and they would take your pulse, they would check your tongue. This is how I learned so much about checking the tongue, more than what I'd even learned from my grandmother. I just kept gathering and gathering, okay? So foods and herbs and Chinese medicine and energy and 16 years of body work and on and on and on and on. And this comes into a beautiful amalgamated jewel of a healer. This is what we were long ago in those cuneiform tablets that came from Sumer. My grandmother was personally friends with Zechariah Sitchin, and some 22 of those 40 tablets that he had possession of, there were a lot more, there was thousands of tablets, were disclosed to you. You didn't get the whole story. It was only carried over through mouth, through the sacred chalice, the blood of the feminine. That's why she's a female. When I do trace element studies, the Fe stands for iron, okay? She's the iron backbone of the human civilization, of humanity, right? The dark, beautiful female that was pigment rich, loaded up with minerals. But just like we've been excavating all over Africa and taking all the gold and taking all the diamonds, and everyone wants all the crystals, and we excavate and pull everything out of the ground, and then we give you water full of halogens and chlorine and fluorine. The human body has also started to lose, in the last especially 250 years, your own minerals and trace elements, so you can't possibly function at par. So you become a much lesser version of yourself because you no longer have exactly what you need. You no longer have the spark plugs, the energy, the power, the radiance, the strength, the longevity. We now think, I was speaking with someone on the phone just, several days ago who said, this man was old. He was like in his 70s. And I was like, ooh, not that I'm taking offense because I'm 58 here next month, but what I am saying is that was not old. Those were the babies. The 70-year-olds were the babies. So if Noah in the Bible lived until 960 years, and Chinese people were living 360 years until recently, we need to take a reevaluation and see what's real and what's actually, falsity that's being fed to you, okay? So now, in traditional Chinese medicine, you would lay down, they would check your tongue, they would check your pulse in 3 different places, and they would tell you either have a serpentine, a snake-like pulse, right? Or you'd have rabbit pulse, or whatever you would have. And it made it a little more fun for the children, especially when I would bring my son Zawa to 5 branches in SoCal. And by the age of 5, he had his first, needle, acupuncture needle, a pediatric needle, which is a red tip right here, because with children especially, they've got a faster metabolism. And, if they go and they eat at a friend's house or something and they get a little tummy ache, like they can, it's very common, as Kim knows and Karen knows. This is the great eliminator point. And so we often will rub this if we have headaches or we have congestion or we've got constipation. It's called the web in between the thumb and the fingers. But in traditional Chinese medicine, it's called the great eliminator point, okay? All of the points have a name, just like, right here in the middle, that Indian yoga calls the third eye, and others and myself have always called the far eye, the far sensing eye. These are the eyes that you look out of. This is the eye that you sense everything with, and I mean everything. You need to have solar radiation and your minerals and your energy moving, so you cannot be stagnated and have this far third eye hall of impressions point to be able to work for you, because solar radiation is taken in and refracted up into the upper glands. It has been extensively looked at and studied, and most of it has been suppressed from you, but a lot of it you can see in the hieroglyphs. So I've got Irish moss, bladderwrack, filtered water, 4 limes juiced, a big 3 to 4 inch finger of ginger, 4 blackberries, and like I said, the Irish moss and the bladderwrack, and a little tiny bit of coconut palm sugar. So I'm going to take a drink. It's really delicious, and it costs you pennies to make this because a huge piece of ginger is $2 to $3. They would last you a week or two if you're using a 3 to 4 inch piece. All you got to do is take your knife on a cutting board, take your limes in your dollar store, Dollar Tree little juicer, and squeeze them down. Pour the lime juice and the water, put the ginger in there because this will handle it for 59 bucks. It's a ninja. You can order it online. And I've got my Irish moss and my bladderwrack, which I make into ice cubes, because if it sits in the refrigerator and I don't get to it for some reason, I want to make sure that I don't waste it. So I'm being candid. I'm regenerating myself. Stagnation produces a lot of issues, and it's producing stress in our families, in our communities, in our workplace. The doctors, the American Medical Association, the American Diabetes Association, all of the associations that fall underneath the umbrella of the American Medical Association have a systematic way of doing things. If you look at many of the people that are starting to come out and speak now, about the truth, because they've been learning it themselves in the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years, maybe for some people, even 30 years. My grandmother knew this stuff in 1965, and she said, Karen, don't you trust the Western allopathic doctor when it comes to them ever healing you, because trauma is completely different than healing disease. And now the diseases have been added onto the field so that you will be much more likely to have at least one of them. And she gave me many, many of her different prophecies back in the 1970s, which I won't get into all of them right now. But I'm going to put my glasses on, and I want to make sure that I got a blackberry seed in my throat. Many of us are basically in crisis. Our family members are addicted. Fentanyl, the opioid crisis, benzos, prescription medications, lots of antidepressants. Lots of people are just absolutely fatigued to the gills, okay? And your watermelon cooler, yay. Welcome, Jackie. Good to see you. Think of yourself, when you think about stagnation, and I talked with you a little bit about how traditional Chinese medicine would have put a needle point here to kind of open up my hall of impressions. I told you with my son Zawa at the age of 5, before we relocated to Minnesota, they put a little needle point right here to open up his congestion and his elimination. That's a fire element, okay? This is more of your air, ether, akasha, your spirit. Think of a body of water, like I said, like a pond. If the water inside of the pond is stagnant and it's not moving, it's going to start to attract a lot more mosquitoes and bugs and all kinds of bacteria in it. You're not going to go want to swim in a stagnant pond of water. And there's a good reason for that. You're going to get sick. You're going to get sick if your living waters, these are your living waters, right? They have to circulate to the eyes, to the mouth, the saliva, the digestion. You need to have your water pump functioning. And in order to do that, you've got to have the trace elements and the glands functioning really well in your brain. So as I go to Walmart and I see people hobbling and wobbling, and I go to my workplace and I overhear ladies that are sitting down, paying to get their hair cut. They're paying to get their fingernails done. They're paying to keep up with a very manicured life, but they're not going to pay to make a smoothie. They're not going to give up going to the buffet and eating and eating and eating, right? They're going to talk about how broke they are, but behind closed doors, they're shoving and shoving and shoving. So what ends up happening is the gut ends up also becoming very stagnant. You can't move and circulate It's not as if like it's a car that you're going to keep putting gasoline in the car so it'll keep making locomotion and going. You make locomotion and energy not from eating a protein bar. Don't be duped into the 18, 20, or 30 gram protein bars, protein shakes, the calcium, the bone broth, and all that. These are people selling you products. What you really need to do is get out and walk. You need to get solar radiation on the body because it's the type of radiation that makes plants grow. It makes you grow. You're no different than a plant, okay? So you don't want to stagnate your internal living waters or your digestion or your elimination. Your garbage dump is on the back. It's called your anus. That's where the garbage, the parasites, the toxins, the bacteria, if you don't circulate and get enough fluids in your system, meaning you're not drinking enough water every day, and you're eating when you're really thirsty, you're eating when you're really stressed, you're eating when you're really tired, you're eating because you feel hopeless, despairing, you feel like you're stuck and you're trapped. And you know what? That's not just me. That's not just you. That's everyone, because you'd have to be completely asleep to not realize that every single person right now is trapped, or you're so financially insulated with money that you can create exactly what you want. But eventually you're going to go outside and you're going to see, like I did last night, all kinds of people that are using drugs because, as my grandmother told me, and her mother told her before that, and her mother before that, and her mother before that, we are turning to, I'm circulating my shea butter on my neck here, we are turning to, there's a pill for that. There's a drug for that. There's a medicine for that. If I go to the dog park and the dog is very stagnant and I see cysts popping out of its body and I see that it's getting cataracts on its eyes and I can see that it's like a stagnant pond of water. And I say something like, is this your canine companion? They're going to probably most often say something like, well, yeah. And I go, well, you know, I have a couple of ideas that'll really kind of get that moving because the dog's got some obesity and some stagnation. And they go, what? Right? And this was the case even last night at a local dog park, is people become offended instead of becoming intrigued and tuned in and wanting to listen to what could we do to better ourselves. So I'm under stress, you're under stress, and everyone else out there is under stress because we're all trying to play the game of fetch. It's a game that you think you just taught your dog, but it's actually been taught to you. You're out there fetching the bones of society, which is, how can I make it through today? How can I make enough money? How can I get my food? How can I keep my car running? How can I keep my phone turned on? And on and on and on. And you can be very comfortable for a while and you can slip into the illusion that, well, I'm going to be fine. I'm smarter than that. I can keep it all together. But eventually you're not going to be able to keep it all together. And what happens is when hopelessness and despair set in, they set in after the initial red flags, right? That's why I wore my red shirt today. The red flag was a little bit of anxiety, like, woo, I didn't realize this was going on in the world. I wasn't quite awake and aware that, in fact, CPS doesn't always do the most righteous thing with children. Oh my goodness, now it's happened to my family. My family has become opioid addicted. Oh my goodness, now my daughter went out and had a great partner and I thought he was the greatest guy in the world. He's got her addicted to snorting fentanyl every day. And now you go home and you're crying and you're miserable and your daughter is in your house making a mess, using up resources. You're worried every day. You're chasing them down on the street. And it would be different if this was like one or two people, but this is millions of people, millions and millions and millions that are stagnating with a toxic brain. So how did we get a stagnated, toxic brain? How did we always have a toxic brain? I don't think so. okay? And because I was told in the early 1960s, and because I'm as old as I am, I'm able to have seen, observing seen, not just looking seen, not just looking, but observing, quietly observing around me, sitting down and thinking about things and using my eyes to take in knowledge through observation is different than just looking and passing judgment around me. Listening, keen listening and observation means coming out of judgment and saying, whoa, wait a minute. I'm seeing that people don't really understand dogs, healing, the planet, the resources, the necessity for healing our brain. If we don't heal our brain, more and more and more people in pain are going to turn to drugs, to manicuring their exterior. They honestly believe that life is not well if they cannot go sit in a chair at a hair salon and pay someone to cut their hair. They honestly believe life is not too good if they can't have someone do their fingernails, if they can't run their dog to the groomer, if they can't go run their car through the car wash, if they can't pay the parking they have to pay to go to work, which pretty soon, if you listen to me, I said, you're going to pay to go get your food at the grocery store. You're already paying to get your loved ones out of jail. You're paying to go to court. You're paying for the attorneys. Pretty soon it's like, what else can they invent? Meaning the systems, so that you are going to become more and more despairing and hopeless, anguished and anxious and depressed. And you're going to go in and say, just give me what you've got, doctor. I can't take this anymore. And there's going to be a segment of people who say, I can't take this anymore. That's me, right? I can't take this anymore. Whether I feel like I have the most perfect hair and the most perfect teeth and everything going for me right in the world, I'm stressed right now. I need to get on here and give this medicine because it is crucial. I've watched scores and scores of elders that are now gone prematurely. Dr. Sabi, I'm watching. I can see their eyes. I can see my own eyes. I can see how I feel. I can see the stress I'm under. I can see when other people get on and they're well and taken care of inside of academia, inside of the medical industry, and they can get up to the podium and sound great because the systems have ensconced them into their protectiveness so that they can continue to churn the cash registers, right? And they have good information. But a toxic brain got that way because, take notes here, we cut down our grandmother trees. You call them mountains and hills, and you see the valleys, right? This is mama. Mama was cut down, okay? So you no longer have the trees that were gigantic, expansive trees that gave you optimized oxygen. So like I said before, if you take all the trace elements out of the food, you're going to do what? You're going to keep eating and eating and eating and eating. We've all gone through it. There isn't anyone that hasn't gone through this, that you're going to keep eating and eating and eating and eating because instinctively you're saying, if I keep eating more, somehow I'm going to get what I'm missing because that's your nature. It's inside of you. You can't deny it. It's your nectar, okay? So now you're going to keep eating and eating. So the grandmother trees are gone. Now, if for some reason you can't see that there's planes all up in the sky that are leaking what people call chemtrails, that all kinds of emissions are coming out, including the deposition of lithium, which is an antidepressant. Some of my clients are taking it. And come to find out, when I did their hair testing, which you can order on my website at naturallywithkaren.com under the lab testing or the shop, you can even order it in conjunction with a 30-minute consult so that I can review it with you when you're done and make recommendations for you. then you're unaware, and you should really open to the idea of thinking about, considering, looking up in the sky and realizing that chemicals are being dumped down that are affecting you, that are affecting your brain, they're affecting your eyesight, they're affecting your hearing, they're affecting your skin. They're a part of everything from asthma to Morgellons disease, okay? Not just that, the grandmother trees, so the denial of pure, unfiltered, deliciousness, oxygen, rich environments are no longer, they were chopped down. Were they chopped down on purpose? I don't know for sure, but it sure feels that way. Your body needs to have that water pump going, or you're going to get stagnant. But when you shower, when you go to brush your teeth, when you go to take a bath, and I know some of you are going to say, nope, I've got a water filtration system on my house. That's wonderful. That is great. That's a super positive. But what happens when you can't do that anymore? What happens when the water's so bad, or as Nestle's agenda, and I remember studying Nestle in 1991 at the University of California, Santa Cruz, when I took a course called Capitalism and Nature through the professor, and I had to read Mark Reasoner's book called Cadillac Desert. And the professor talked about in 1991 how Nestle was behind why Americans were getting beheaded down in Central America, because we had convinced Native people in Central America through billboard advertisements by Nestle and other companies that in fact their breast milk was inferior to a baby formula. When the price of formula was so high, especially for people that there's no way in hell they could have afforded that, and that was absolutely well known before the marketing attempts, which were hostile, they lost their babies. Babies died in mother's arms, okay? And people got pissed, and you can't blame them. So stagnation is starting to rip away the concept that mamas feed babies. These are not boobs. These are your breasts. Stop calling them boobs. They're your breasts, and they feed our babies. They're also for pleasure. But if you look at them, they're beautiful flower-like, so they bring fruit. Flowers bring fruit. A flower is an extension of a plant. If you do some gardening, you'll see that if your plant's in too tight of a container and you don't give it enough room for expansion, it'll start to flower too soon, and you'll need to move it and get it into a larger soil. Okay, this is the fruit. This is the antibodies. This is the way that you give your child, just like the blood flowing from the placenta and we clamp the cord too soon. We have gotten rid of our oxygen-rich air. We have changed our water with halogens. We have deposited chemicals in the air, through which we call chemtrails and lithium, to sedate the people, because we know that people are ready to snap, okay? And then we've dumped a ton of chemicals out there that we call opioids and fentanyl and heroin and benzos and the Xanax bars that are being made from China. How do I know? I wouldn't have known. If I could have just financially insulated myself and been living somewhere in my little, escapism to Costa Rica, like a lot of people that did a lot of grab and go and made their courses and made their money, but they're not going to be able to stay there forever unless and until, having my legal background for 18 years in Silicon Valley, unless and until we actually listen and do something and create change within ourselves first, like put the mask on in the plane before you put it on baby. Put your mask on, then you put it on baby, right? It goes against everything a mother wants to do, but it's necessary. We have to fix ourselves, stabilize our environment to the degree that we can, and then we need to be thinking about our purchases, our time, how we spend it, what we spend it on. Do we need to go pay for haircuts? Do we need to get fingernails done? Or should we be focusing on supporting organic, seeded, non-sprayed food? Should we be supporting running to the grocery store all the time, or should we be potting some plants, so that we can continue to eat, right? Should we keep worrying about manicuring our lawns and mowing our lawns, right? Spraying our lawns and seeding our lawns and making our lawns look good, just like our hair, and the color contact lenses and all the hair dye and the perms, because we need to look good, but it's not good in here. And it's not good in here because the brain is toxic, and the brain is toxic because you're not circulating your water pump. You're not walking, you're sitting down too often, your life is too sedentary, you're living on the pills that the doctor gave you to just overlay your problems and your hopelessness and your despair. And so now that you're doing that, you're even more sedentary and more depressed and more withdrawn and more anxious until you're agoraphobic. And once you're agoraphobic in their terminology, right, the Harry Potter language, what you're really doing is you're saying, I can't get up and I can't go anywhere. I just can't do it. And people around you have gotten to the point of such fatigue that they've said, you can heal yourself. And you couldn't listen. You couldn't listen. You never got struck with something that you really honestly couldn't overcome. 99.9% of the time, you could have overcome it. Okay? This is delicious, and it's feeding my cells. Okay? Stagnation is not moving enough. It's not walking on your feet, right? It's not having bendable soles so that all of these reflex points that are not only located in your hands, but they're also located on the bottoms of your feet. They need to move and they need to bend. We're energy. We're energy that is an essence. You know, some people have said we're about 28 grams or 2 ounces of spirit essence inside of this vehicle. So as you go and you sit in your vehicle and you sit down in your car and you grab the steering wheel and you put the key in and you get ready to drive, take a moment the next time you do that and say to yourself, I just put myself in another vehicle. So now I can start to realize I am also in this vehicle. Okay. So you are spirit. You are the Holy Spirit of spirits that is always talked about. However, now you're projected inside of this vehicle. So what's the reason? How come physics isn't talking about that? How come they're not talking about the fact that you being projected into this vehicle or being born? And think about the maternal instincts and how strong they are. Is that by design or is that real? Because what's going on with toxic brain and stagnation is that so many of the children have been funneled through the institution that you call school, funneled through the institution that you call the doctor, the almighty, all-knowing doctor that goes to school for what, 8 years, 10 years? Okay. The almighty systems that are out there, the penal system, the doctor system, the school system, I could keep going, right? But they're fashioning your child to become a weapon that will be used against you because your child will undoubtedly become extremely manipulative. In fact, it's a rare incidence that I'm actually on the screen with my clients like you and I are right now, and I'll usually be able to look at a hair tissue report, and based on mama, I can say to my client, I know that you've got a 10, 12, 16-year-old. Usually it's puberty or after, because that's when the hormones come in. And the brain has got to be doing what? That pineal gland has got to be bringing that TSH down to your thyroid, right? Your hypothalamus has got to be connecting with your pituitary and then on down to your adrenal glands, or things aren't going to work right for you. You're going to have problems. And I'll ask them, is your son or daughter angry? And honest people answer me back, meaning they're honest and forthright. And they come back and they say, yeah, he is. It's with the people I work with. It's with the clients on the screen and everything else. They're thinking, I'm worried because ever since my child went through puberty, they seem exceptionally angry. Like no one sees it outside. They see the perfectly behaved, the face that we all put on, and we're all taught since we were taught about George Washington and his poker face. We were taught to put on the face that everything's fine. Well, everything's not fine in my life. It's not fine when my close family member is addicted to heroin and has had multiple relapses. That's not fine. It's not fine when there's about 3 murders in the last week in what formerly was like, Mayberry RFD, an extremely small, less than 100,000 people population city in Duluth and surrounding areas, in Minnesota. It's not fine what's going on in your environments. And if you're not aware of them, you're probably not out there really experiencing what's really going on. Stagnation is not moving enough, not walking your feet. It's not getting out and get solar radiation. How many times, as I've got, a slightly pinked nose here because I've been out in the sun, you can see it with my shea butter on my shoulders, right? I've been scrubbing my skin to regenerate myself, drinking my Irish moss and bladderwrack, getting in and doing my hour on the elliptical, first thing in the rise whenever I possibly can, at least 4, 5, 6 times a week. Getting out and walking additional after my YouTube video here today. You have a circulatory system. Your lungs, according to Professor Hilton Hotema, have to be able to expand. Now, if you are like 90% of Americans right now, and you started on formula, even if your mother breastfed for a month or 3 months or 6 months or a short time, you're already congested and congealed. So baby formula, your intestines got gummy and gooey, right? And when our children have colds and asthma and the flu and ear tubes and sinus problems and they're just snotting up all over the place, it's typically because they lived on a lifetime of goopy, mucusy, phlegm and phlegm producing type items. So baby formula, cheese, crackers, gummies, the little squirty things in the bags and the jellos that are full of dead animal bones and everything else. And we have to move ourselves out of the protein and calcium mythologies. You don't eat them, you make them. So if your lungs and all of your bronchial tubes are full of congestion, you're going to sound like I did months ago, where I was so stressed out and not sleeping well and had packed on 40 pounds from the stress hormones, that yes, you're not going to breathe really well, okay? So like I said, unless you're financially insulated, there's no way that you couldn't possibly feel this. So stagnation is stagnant energy. You're not circulating your water. You're not eating correctly, right? And you're not eating the right things that are going to give you the ability to make the trace elements. If you don't have enough copper in your body, or it's all lodged in your liver, you're not going to be able to have enough serotonin and dopamine. You're just not. You're not going to be able to make dopamine. Parkinson's disease is a deficiency of copper and dopamine. When's the last time your doctor ever told you that? When is the last time your doctor ever said to you, you've got a copper deficiency, and that's why you're not making dopamine, and that's why you're so critically depressed and you don't have any energy, and it's because you're eating like, pardon me, but you're eating like shit. Okay? You're eating like shit, so you have no possible way of making what you need. Okay, listen, you cannot pray that away. Oh, I want my disease to go away. Please, 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 God, take my disease away. You cannot pray it away. You can't. Prayer is good. I ask for prayer. Prayer is amazing, okay? You can't pray away your disease. You can't buy your disease. You can't go buy a pill. You can't go get in a scanning machine. You can't have someone just cut it out of you, because unless you deal with the root, you are never going to get well. You're going to become fixed. It's like taking, it's like taking and putting more gas in your car. When it's running out, it's going to run again, right? It's like taking and putting an artificial hip in someone who wants a hip replacement. Do they now walk and they feel great? Yes. What's going on inside? What's going on inside is that your body's going, I don't want that. Get that artificial part out of me. This is amazing. Okay? You cannot buy your health. You cannot keep taking the medications. It took me years to get the confidence up 3 years ago to help my clients remove warfarin, which is a powerful blood thinner, from their regimen, their daily regimen. Why? Why are people having grandma and grandpa and now children having aneurysms and strokes? Why are so many people having cysts in their breasts, cysts near their pituitary gland especially, okay, going crazy, not feeling good, going crazy on the benzos and the alcohol and the drugs? Because the cysts started developing. I can tell by looking at your children's baby picture. I can see it with the eyes. I can see it with the tongue. I can see it with the skin, okay? I can see it by what mom and dad and grandma and grandpa all suffered from. So yes, grandma and grandpa are having strokes. They are being rendered brain dead. Why are we having strokes? Why? Anybody want to guess? We're having strokes because our blood is too thick. Is our blood viscous and too thick for no reason? Just random bad luck? It's just a part of aging? It's not just a part of aging. Our brain is toxic. If the lungs were able to circulate as they were, geared to do, as Professor Hilton Hotema talked about, the heart would be able to expand, okay? And the gut that has that 32 feet of intestines would never be constantly filled with eating. You wouldn't hunger and then go and then hunger and eat and go and hunger and eat and go. This is a business that sold you food products, not food. If it was food, you'd go outside and you'd have all kinds of watermelons growing, and you would not need to eat 10 watermelons a day. But because for at least 8 generations, your children have gone to school and they've been taught the food groups. And when I was in school, way back in the dinosaurs, when there was 4 food groups, you had to have your protein, your calcium, your breads and grains and cereals, right? And then your fruits and vegetables were kind of on the bottom, if that's how I remember it anyway, okay? So now there is a fear, just like the fear that was, that was set in place about cannabis, the devil's weed, Satan's weed. It makes you go crazy, loco in the cabeza. It just does horrible things to people. It turns them into something different. We know that's not true. The same thing is true with protein and calcium. You're scared to death that you're not going to get your nutrients, that you're not going to get what you need, that somehow it's going to compromise you. You can't possibly live on fruits and vegetables. I'm living proof. Have I veered off in 35 years? Yes, I have. But in 1984, Pamela Masters, who had gone through Hippocrates Institute training, Aries Latham went through Hippocrates. Ross Greenearth was also around Hippocrates. It was a big deal in the 70s and the 80s, I think 70s. I know for sure the 80s, the early 80s. I got on board. I was asked to come to pay for a many hundreds dollars class. It was, 4, 6, 12 weeks. I really can't remember, to be honest. But we kept going week after week, I think a couple times a week. And we learned how to make the pâtés. So she patterned it after what she learned at Hippocrates. And I am so thankful because it changed my entire life. And toxic brain is not just what you eat. It's not just about being alkaline. It's about balancing those trace elements. It's about every one of your daily habits, and they don't have to be complex. You don't have to buy a plan to go through 10, 14, 20, 50 days. What you need to do is have some hand holding. That's why I do coaching. I do coaching because, and hair testing, because hair is tissue, right? And if your hair is dyed, you're like, well, I can't do that because my hair is dyed. You can do pubic hair, you can do nail clippings, you can wait for your hair to grow out. You only need the first 1.5 inches up here. I will show you how to reverse gray for most people, not everyone, for most people. Reverse disease, For most people, not everyone, no one can predict, no one can promise, especially if we start later in age and you've been on a lot of medications, you've been getting flu shots, you need to detoxify. Wish we could. I wish we could say absolutely everyone will, but you've got to detox your brain. So what if you have cysts in your brain? What if it has gotten so stagnant in there that those little cysts that were forming from the time you were born are now hardened and congealed? And now you're having headaches and migraines. You better, emphasis on better. You better pick up. You better listen. You better listen. Because Dr. Brownstein will show you that you go from a cyst to a nodule. You can go, not you do go. You can go from a cyst to a nodule to a tumor. So wouldn't you want to intervene before that became a hardened tumor in your body, in your brain? When there is a way to balance your trace elements so that your body can start to get rid of that. It's called apoptosis, by the way. Okay? You can get rid of cysts, nodules, and even tumors in the breast, on the ovaries, in the uterus. You call them fibroid tumors, right? Right? Up in the brain. They're all over. So what I'm saying is that you have a lot of hope. Stagnation is something that is so common today. And it's something that, whoops, Legolas is getting sick, so I'm going to jump off this video, speaking of stress. Does anybody have, oh, Karen, thank you for listening. That's great. Let me just see if I missed anything. Oh, he's taking a break on it. And I know Anthony is on the way home here in just a moment, so he can probably help me. Oh my God. Okay, so Kim has mentioned here, if you're watching this on YouTube and you can't see the thread that's on the right-hand side, that the system, the medical industry, is telling women not to breastfeed. And another thing that's really super important, could you take Legolas out for me really quick, Sally, since I'm living right now? Another thing that's really super important is that women are experiencing postpartum illness. So, you know, they give birth to baby, should be one of the happiest times in their lives. Should be, right? I mean, probably shouldn't use should, but I'm going to use it in this instance. It was one of the happiest times of my absolute happiest times of my life. I had cleaned my womb. It is the subject of a book that I really intend to have completed here already, but I'm adding to it all the time, about preparing to optimize for baby. If you're interested in a lot of what I'm talking about, please connect with me privately at naturallywithkaren@gmail.com. Talk with me and say, I want to join your, you know, what you're doing. I want to help support you. I've got a great location for a center. I want to start off with the hair test, and I want to see what it does for me. I want the hair test and the consult so I can see exactly what we can do for me, you know. I'm open to that. I'm looking to have a solid pack, and I need a pack that's going to be in the physical with me. People that are not users, escapism, not getting high, people that really want to be very crystal clear, okay? Need a center. We need a place that people can go where they can actually get real healing, where there can be dogs and food growing, you know, some dogs around the environment, food growing, herbs growing, spices growing. I'm a phenomenal plant-based chef of 35 years and nutritionist. I'm a certified yoga instructor. I'm an herbalist. I've done massage for 16 years, you know, here in Minnesota and also in California. And I've coached people for 35 years. And sometimes it's kind of frustrating because you always hear, well, do you know Dr. So-and-so? Putting the mind-body expertise, the detoxification expertise, the plant-based nutrition of many decades, the actual experience of helping people come off of these medications, because like with kidney disease, with the testimonial I have from Denny Wita, who's in his early 70s now, and this is 3 years ago. You can go to my YouTube channel. You can go to my website. You can see the written testimonials and the video. People are afraid. They're on multiple medications, including blood thinners. The doctors at the Mayo and the VA in this case continuously said, you're going to risk a stroke. You're going to risk an aneurysm. You're playing with your life here. This is dangerous. And even one of my clients on my Facebook page is a local client that's actually a Coumadin nurse, which is a blood thinner, because that medication, which is actually a rat poison, is so profitable, and they've got so many people on it, because you don't go to the hospital or the doctor, and the hospital or the doctor tells you, hey, we're going to put you on a plant-based diet, because Rick Brewer, who's the CEO of Cloquet Memorial Hospital, I'm pointing behind me over here in Cloquet, denied me access after teaching 14 courses through Carleton Community Education, Whole Foods in Duluth, denied me the opportunity after taking millions of dollars of donations from the community, business and homeowners like myself, to expand that hospital, to make this whole lower wing of the hospital with rooms that people could teach in. Weight Watchers is welcome. Other courses are welcome. I am not welcome to teach plant-based nutrition for $90 for 5 weeks. I bought the food. I brought the various handouts and so on and so forth, and the cleanup and the materials. I only wanted to use the space, and that's because they don't want any mention whatsoever that disease is reversible. And even though I gave them my promise that I would only talk about how plant-based diet takes down inflammation, I was not allowed to go teach that. So people like me that have poured tens of thousands and thousands of dollars, which I have, even $2,500 alone to become a yoga teacher, thousands to become an herbalist, thousands to go to massage school, thousands for 100, over 100 books, thousands for all the courses and the DVDs and Dr. Brownstein, and I could just keep going because it's an everyday thing for me, are financially disempowered. And so it's frustrating, because eventually the majority of us that were, 20 years behind where I am right now at 35 years just said, forget it. I'm just going to go take a regular job and take the easy way out. This is just too frustrating. So, and because people are used to what they have taught them is evidence-based medicine. It's not okay for me to read the cards, but it's okay for doctors to read your blood. Okay. Now, the blood can give me some things, don't get me wrong. Do I want to see some things that are important, like C-reactive protein and maybe a thyroid panel and maybe your albumin, maybe ceruloplasmin because of its relationship to copper and Wilson's disease? I do, and I understand what they are, and I look at them and I factor them for sure. My clients bring them, but I'm exceptionally crystal clear that I cannot provide medical or psychological advice. I cannot tell them to get off their medication. I cannot say, we're going to do this together. I say, speak with your doctor. If your doctor said it's okay, or if you're going to get off of it anyway. And if a lot of the times they come back and they say, my doctor said I could just stop that medication anyway. I don't have to transition off of it. They're perfectly fine with it. And then we work with that. In the case with Denny, he worked with his doctors and his doctors really didn't want to do that, but they kept checking his blood. And each time as we went through the 14 months with Denny, his kidney function got better and better. So instead of being told he was going to die in 2 to 5 years, he was told that his kidney function improved on a steady clip as we worked together. So I call that reversing disease. So I hope everybody's doing well. Yeah, I don't know if it's just this area and Cloquet Memorial Hospital or what it is, if it's everywhere. I deliberate back and forth on moving, but I'm looking for people to connect with me who go, I see what you've got to offer, and I'm all about that. So go back and look at my other videos. You'll see that I was a little more slim and trim, and I'm getting there right now. So don't judge me in the state I'm in. Thank you for joining me, and I appreciate your coming along.